Hello and welcome to the Spoken Not Stirred podcast. I am your host, Dauda Ladejobi. In this episode, we have a conversation with Phoebe Wagner, who runs Crep Project. We take a look at her journey through the arts and also get to know a little bit more about the project itself. At the end of the conversation, Phoebe gives us a great prompt, which hopefully will get some of you writing as well. So, without any more delay, let's get into it.
Yes, we are back for another installment of Spoken Not Stirred. We are joined by another amazing guest. Phoebe, do you want to do like an introduction, or should I be like a good host and introduce you? No. You should. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Phoebe Wagner. I'm a poet and theatre maker, and I run Crep Project, which is currently working with the Big Deal programme and the drama group specifically. And we are currently creating an exhibition around their trainers at the moment. But in general, what we do is we create exhibitions exploring trainer culture with young and working class people. I have also, I started out in poetry and theatre. I went to the Brit School and I trained at Rose Bruford on the European Theatre Arts course. And that's kind of led me into writing. I published my pamphlet in 2019 and doing various work with organisations like Omnibus Theatre, Poetry Takeaway. I think that's all the ones I can think of at the moment. And I kind of like, as you can get a sense from Crep Project, I like to do work that centres community and the kind of like personal in the political, so like the everyday politics of what's happening in the world. So that's me.
Sick. I'm so glad I didn't do that intro because that was a great intro. And there's a lot more that I obviously didn't know about, like your drama training as well, which is always interesting. I'm a fellow actor, so I always find it interesting. So I guess, did you start off being more interested in just the performance side of things and then you went into the poetry, or was poetry something that was always
so I started out in theatre, and it was actually a workshop that I attended through Brit School that got me onto poetry. I grew up, I did like dance. I used to go to a local youth club when I was little, and I wasn't very good at dance, and it was like just like basic you kind of, I was okay, I was all right, but you know when you're like kind of like just doing it because you enjoy it, but you just kind of want to just like dance in your own way, right? So I was doing that, and then I started doing drama classes, and I loved that. I loved Harry Potter when I was growing up. So like I was like, oh, I'd love to be in film or EastEnders. I used to watch EastEnders every day with my mum. So I was like, yeah, okay. I was like the really obvious ways of getting into those things. I didn't like, I grew up in Croydon, like right near where the Brit School was. So I was kind of like in this position, quite privileged position of being like, okay, it's like round the corner from me. I should just apply for the Brit School, and then I did that, and that's how I kind of got into poetry. I started going to like poetry nights, like Boxed In, and that's in East London, and that's it.
That's the one in
Shoreditch, Box Park, yeah.
Ran by Sean. Let me
Sean
not.
Mahoney and your Shoreditch,
yeah. Both amazing poets and a great night as well. So it's amazing. It's really interesting, and you touched on something that I find really interesting there, which is Brit School was close to you, and that I guess you're saying that was a drive. Do you think you would have went down that route if you wasn't so close to Brit School? Do you think you would have found, or was it very much seeing that next to you and being there that?
So like my primary school was really close. Like we went we went on a trip to the Brit School when I was like 7, and I remember like going and seeing like a musical, and being like, oh, okay, that's something that's possible for me. And it's like, I think it's important, especially in the work I'm doing now, that we give young people the opportunity to like see things like that and be like, I can imagine myself here. So yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have been able to see something like the Brit School or like what they do without being close to it. Yeah, I hope that they're doing outreach for like different areas outside. They have quite a wide catchment area, and when you go to the Brit School, some people have actually moved from up north even to go to the school. When you're like 16, that's like a big deal. So it's like, yeah, it's an interesting place. But yeah.
Oh, so yeah, it's interesting. Even the fact that you went on the trip there when you was in primary school, I didn't know that was a thing that what's it, performing arts schools did. So that's quite interesting. So I guess coming from performing and then you found this love for poetry, how did this project come about? Like I just want to know that trajectory, because it's such an interesting project as well. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it, but how did it come about?
So in 2020, last year in February, I'd like for about a year or so, I'd had this idea that I wanted to make a solo show about my collection of trainers, because I was kind of so disgusted with how many trainers I had, but also really like, I loved them and I couldn't get rid of them. And I thought there was something quite interesting in that like contradiction. And I wanted to explore like consumerism. I had all of these ideas. So I approached Omnibus Theatre. They have a scratch program called Engine Room. I just proposed like a short pitch of it. And they accepted me onto the Engine Room scratch. And I did a scratch in February last year. And I worked with Rachel Lemon, who is a really great director, and she helped me kind of like create the dramaturgy and really like get my writing down. I had loads of writing, but we just sat down and like put it all together and was like, right, what is the structure of this? What is the story we're telling? And I also worked with a violinist called Fra Bashmiti, and she created like a score for it, and she was working on it. And at the time, so it was like a scratch. I was like, okay, I really enjoyed doing that. And, I saw myself, I could go to Edinburgh with, I could do this. It's like, which is like the obvious thing that I could do, right? It's like, for me in the performing arts and like from my theatre background, that was like the obvious thing to do. But at the same time, I had reached out to Turf Projects, which is an arts space in Croydon that you can send them a pitch of something that you want to do, and they'll sometimes have the ability to give the space to you for free. So I pitched something. I pitched doing Crep Project with them, but as a exhibition. And it was like the fact that I'd like pitched, I was like, okay, I'm pitching this exhibition. I was kind of like more excited by that. I was more excited about working with young people on an exhibition than I was on performing this show. So I was like, well, if I'm more interested in that, then let's try that. So then how did Crep Project happen? It basically turned more into that we want to work with young working class people. So I reached out to some artists that I really rated, that they did stuff and I felt that they would be great for the project. So we've got Ben Eccleston, who is our sound artist, Tatenda Machai, who is another poet who assists me with facilitating the poetry stuff, and Alex Warner, who is also known as Cool Cat Warner. He creates visual art, but he's based in Glasgow, but he creates all of the like drawing, sculpture, any of the visual stuff. So yeah, that's kind of like the journey that that's like the long winding journey that it took. But yeah,
that's a great story. And before I just pick right into that, I just want to ask, what is a disgusting amount of shoes? What's the amount of shoes?
Because okay, I know everyone has like different rates. People have hundreds of shoes. I only have about 20, 30 pairs of trainers, but it's, you know, like for me at that time, especially also I was getting into, there's like this whole area of YouTube that is kind of exploring minimalism. And I was watching a lot of YouTubers that were like talking about being more sustainable and having less clothes and stuff. And I was like, I want to do that, but I was like, no, like, and I was working at office as well. So I kind of like, I was working at a trainer shop. I was working at a trainer shop, like surrounded by trainers every day, like getting like discount. And I was like, do you know what? Like there's a whole like world in trainers that I love and I want to explore with people. So yeah, that's it.
No, that's fair. That is fair. Like, I mean, if the discount's there and you're surrounded by it every day, it's what can you do? What can you do? The minimalist movement is actually quite interesting. It's one that I have to take my hats off to because it's not easy. It's not easy. So yeah, no, definitely, yeah. For people who do it, I think it's like it's a great concept, and you know, I think for the majority, I think it's hard for the normal person who is kind of used to a certain level of comfort to, because yeah, I did a job with an actor who she was very much on a minimalist kind of vibe, and it was like every day she's got her like cutlery and cups and stuff like that to make sure that she's not using anything else that she doesn't need to, which was, you got to admire it. But yeah, it's interesting. But back to, I guess, the journey. So that whole conflict of like, I want to put on a show and I want to perform, but then I'm actually more interested in doing this and working with kids. Like, how was that for you? Of like, you know, you've done all of this training to become a performer, but then you find out this is the thing that you're actually more interested in. How was that? And how did you make the decision that this was the route you was going to go down?
There was a few different kind of things I was thinking about. I'd worked in special educational needs schools for about a year and a half as a teaching assistant, and I kind of seen the education system from the inside, and like the SEN education system more specifically, and was kind of like, this is really like, young people have such a hard job. So I was getting, they're just having a really hard time and there's not the funding. And I was getting more into facilitation, like getting more opportunities, facilitating my own poetry practice, and kind of more interested in that. But yeah, I'd had all this training. So with the course that I did, which was European Theatre Arts, they train you to kind of be more of a deviser. So the kind of theatre I like to make is devised theatre as opposed to being like an actor. So I'm more like I call myself more of a theatre maker because I create the theatre in whatever ways that I need to. So I'm producing something like this, like Crep Project, but also like facilitating. It allows me to have different hats on almost. So in a way, I felt like it was a natural progression for me to do this, but I was more seeing in the theatre industry this, especially having done, I did the Edinburgh Fringe, that it wasn't very accessible to working class communities, other marginalised groups. Like, it's very expensive to go to Edinburgh. It's very expensive to run a show there. And that means that the kind of artwork that you see at something like the Fringe is not very diverse at all, even though it's trying to be. So I was like, well, doesn't the art have to go into those community spaces? Like, so I thought, like, you know, trainers are a working class like symbol, something that kids, like when I was growing up and before, like even like with sneakerheads that I'm talking to before, like kids growing up with trainers and their friends and family, like waiting for the next sneaker drop. That's been happening since like the 80s and even before that. So it's like, how can we use that as a vehicle for like joy and but to explore their young people's perspectives and come to them rather than expect the arts to come to you. Do you know what I mean? So that I don't know where the question. What was the question again? I'm just like rambling.
Oh no. It's interesting. I was just wondering how that journey was basically from going from performance to focusing.
Performing, that was it. Yeah.
But no, that was good. That was interesting. The last question for me, I was like, wait, what was the question? Well, yeah. No, that was really good. And I guess one thing I agree with you as well, totally, 100%. I think the arts definitely tries to be diverse as much as it can. I very much don't doubt that. But I think it's the way certain things are set up. Really, it just doesn't allow for too much diversity. Like Edinburgh Fridge is expensive. It's expensive for people who are maybe even more established, but they still have to do fundraisers to get there. So if you don't feel like you're even like in a space to make art, you don't also then feel like you go in a space to ask for money to fund your art from other people, kind of thing. I think there's a lot that makes it restricting for working class individuals. So I guess with that, is that like a conscious thing when you're taking the Crep Project to different areas? What is, I guess, the criteria? What is it that you look for the places you wanted to engage with?
So with the with Studio 3 Arts, how it works is we try and find already pre-established community groups, or if possible, we're currently with other future projects, we're thinking about how we can make a selection process that is not about like how much experience you've had, but it's about the fact that you want to try something new, or that and that you wouldn't be able to experience it usually. So it's about, for us, it's about making sure that the young people that we're bringing on board are like feeling that they can be safe and discuss things in those spaces in our project together and creating an exhibition. So we try and create this sense of community if they don't know each other already, through art making and games and just trying different things. But also, if it's pre-established, it's about honing in on the skills that they've already established. So like with the Big Deal crew, they're already a great bunch that kind of know each other. Quite a lot of them have spent time together doing the other sessions in the drama group. So it's about using those tools, being like, okay, what are we good at? How can we get better at things? But also, using the trainers and taking inspiration from that to kind of go where they want to go. It's very much led by their interests. At the moment, we're working on the exhibition coming up to the last few weeks with Big Deal, and so we're really thinking about how we're going to curate this space together and allow them to create that space for the exhibition and also for the performance. So we'll be launching it in the 3rd of June on Zoom. So how can we make an exciting performance on Zoom that is then performing these poems and these things they've made and sharing it and celebrating that? In terms of how we pull these young people together, it's about trying to go to the arts group. So we're going to Studio 3 Arts to work with their young people. Rather than often some arts groups are kind of it's a selection process. You have to apply, you have to be really good, blah, 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 blah. And it's well, why do you have to be good? And I want to work with young people and facilitate them finding their own route and own path of making art. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Bureaucracy in arts and the ways that we get funding and get groups in can be a bit annoying. Definitely, and it can be restricting as well. Definitely, but that's really good. And I guess it's always helpful when you just know there's an established group there. When you know this year. So I can see where that definitely helps. Before we get into how the sessions run and, you know, the outcome and, you know, what the kids did, which was great, from what we saw was basically a preview, wasn't it? Like that wasn't the finished. Yeah,
that was a kind of preview of stuff we were working on at that time. Yeah.
So but before we get into that, I just wanted to ask, like, what difficulties have you like faced with regards to one, getting this project running and, you know, maybe finding the right groups and stuff like that? What have you found to be difficult in that process?
A good question. I think I've struggled with my own like confidence with it, because especially starting out when you're not really sure what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. That's what I've struggled with. I don't know what I'm doing. I think people in the arts tend to be like, pretend like they know what they're doing all the time. We actually don't know what we're doing. We're just trying things out. I'm just trying things out. So like, I think it's like I've struggled to believe in not knowing where I'm going. If that makes sense. So like, yeah, like especially I remember creating the scratch with Rachel. There were stages in the process where I was like, I've got no idea what this is, just a show about trainers. No. And kind of didn't believe that there was like stuff that I was doing behind it, and that it serves, like it's enough for it to be what it is. So sometimes, yeah, and I think I've struggled with like really clarifying to myself like what is important to me as a practitioner, but also in how I'm running it and how I'm executing that in a space, and being a facilitator, but ensuring that like my intentions are clear. So I'll go into that space, I'm like, I know what I'm doing for these young people. Like it's like be like really like learning how to refine and select really the bare bones of stuff, because I tend to do quite a lot. Even when I speak, I'm like going all over the shop basically. So like that's what I'm still learning to do, is like curating myself, you know, just being like, okay, what is the most important thing? And I think it's just continuous. But I think the main thing is confidence in not knowing what I'm doing. And being like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but we're working it out together. I do know this, and like being like, okay, well, if we don't know some things, just keep going.
Yeah, and that's frightening. It's frightening. And I think especially that for me especially, it's like if it's in a realm where you're somewhat comfortable with one element of it and then the other side of it you don't know, and it's like, oh, I know this thing, so I feel like I should know that. But sometimes it's a new project, it's a whole new thing that we're doing. So yeah, that definitely can be frightening. So, and I admire anyone who does that and puts themselves in new positions all the time to kind of adapt to these things. So it's great. There was something you said. I think it was the truth about not knowing what we are doing as artists. I think this is something that we all need to just be more truthful about. Like, has there been a moment where you had this kind of that kind of realization of like, I'm not always going to know what's going on, and I need to be okay with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, on my course on European Theatre Arts, in the first year, they put you, that one of the first modules you do, you're put into groups of 4 to 5, and you have to create a 20-minute piece in 2 weeks. Sure, you think it's easy, but you're in 9 till 9, unled, 5 days a week. So imagine the chaos of that. Like, you've just started uni, you don't really know these people. Like, people are crying, people are fighting. Like, it happens because you're in for that long. Like, I don't know why that I do know why they did it. There's a reason why I'm saying this, but like, I think that amount of time, you're not able to use it wisely. And actually the time that allowed me to just like completely fail, like we didn't create like the best show. I'm not like, you know, I didn't think it was amazing, but I learned so much in that process just about keeping going towards kind of what your instinct is with what's working, and not knowing what you're doing most of the time. 9 till 9, you're in the whole day. Like sometimes you wouldn't have a plan because literally the day before you'd like discovered we were mainly doing clowning, so it was about like making people laugh, right? So we found this one little thing and we're like, oh well, the next day you'd wake up and be like, oh well, that's not funny. Like Phoebe jumping up and down for half an hour is not funny. And you have to scrap everything and you don't have a plan for that. So it's like, you know, it's what the rehearsal process is like. Like you just learn to kind of be a bit more kind to yourself. And that's not it's not easy. Like I still struggle with it and it's still something I'm learning. But yeah, that's a kind of principle it taught me in order to accept I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And I'm like, from the acting side, I totally understand. So like, yeah. And I feel one thing about acting as well is like you can have those moments, but it's the moment when you get it, when you get a character or when you get something in the scene that, for me, it's like that's what taught me that lesson of like, you know, there was one show that it was like the week before they were still thinking of cutting my character, just because I just wasn't getting that role at all. And yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know what the switch was, but I got it. And it was just that whole thing of, oh, right, yeah, I didn't know what the hell was going on up until the moment where I did. And there's like, you kind of have to be all right with learning that. But I guess with your style of theatre, you said you're more into that devising. You're now always in the unknown, essentially. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if that was a question, or if that was just a point.
Yeah, you are constantly in the unknown. When you're devising, you are making things from scratch, right? You don't have a script. You don't have. You might do some. I mean, some devising theatre companies work with a script, but there's not really like a set way of doing it. Like, you know, you could start with a piece of movement, or you could be starting with a poem. You could be. It's kind of open in that way, which kind of is what appealed to me, especially like coming from a background where like my dad's a musician, so he would do gigs in pubs and stuff like that, and my mum was always into like doing accents, and I just grew up like surrounded by a lot of different types of art, so I never really saw myself as like one thing. Like I never really wanted to be like just an actor. I always just wanted to do everything. So yeah. Yeah.
With that in mind, what like it's a weird question because I personally think both are linked. But what has resonated with you, or is resonating with you more at the moment? Is it the acting side, or the poetry side, or then the organization side of that, leading the workshops and leading these activities? What I guess, yeah.
For me at the moment, especially doing Crep Project, it's the I'm in, I would say, a season of like organizing and facilitating spaces, because I'm learning quite a lot about my own practice through that. And then secondary to that is poetry. I think having done like Roundhouse Poetry Collective and being part of Barbican Young Poets, those spaces where you can create community and write together are so valuable to me. And I just like see that as part of my job as a poet, to create those spaces for other people. So I kind of like see them as like intertwined. And the theatre is also just like another tool. I don't know if there's a name for the thing that I like doing most, but like, yeah, I'm not such a fan of like theatre industry. You know, I wouldn't call myself an actor. Like, I'm more interested in real people creating community spaces and art making together, if that makes sense. Community poet. Just working it out as I go along, as I speak.
I like how you was more hesitant on the poet side. Community poets?
Yeah. This is the thing I think a lot about is that like when you call yourself a poet, it's really hard because it's associated with being like you're being really self-indulgent, like I'm a poet, you know? Right? And I struggle with that. I struggle with like calling myself a poet because people associate it with that and they look at me like, you're a poet. Like, you really think that much of yourself that you're going to say that? But you have to say it. You have to be like, I'm a poet and I don't care if you think it's self-indulgent. The tools I use are words. I don't write books, I write poems. That's my form. So yeah, that's what I think on that.
Sorry.
Did you big time relate to that? Did it really just
like big time relate to that? Like I started doing poetry and like all my friends were doing grime and we all wanted to be grime MCs. And it's a bit awkward being like, yeah, I'm the poet of the group. Everyone's doing like gangster rap and I'm just there like, yeah, do some poetry. It's so weird. So no, but I think it also goes back to when we imagine a poet, you know, there's always that initial image. And I think for a lot of people, that initial image is stuck up middle-aged white man. Like, you know, actually, no, not even middle-aged, more on the older side of things.
Oh,
like,
yeah, white men, right? Yeah.
Like, that is still, unfortunately, like that's what we see. And that's why, you know, you've got this whole divide between performance poets and page poets and all of these things. But the bottom line is we are poets. It's what we do. It's kind of, yeah, that's part and parcel. We just need to embrace it. But also part of us embracing it changes that image of what we think poets are. So yeah, it can definitely feel eggy and cheesy as anything. But yeah, the more we embrace it, the more it helps other people to then embrace it and take the title that they should. You know, you're a young poet, you're a young poet. Doesn't matter if all your friends do grime. Jesus.
Yeah, but like also like grime is just like a branch of poetry and music, and yeah, it's interesting also in that respect, like how grime has a set of social expectations that poetry doesn't, and it's like, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
I find that interesting that they are different spaces and different pockets and different types of people, and it's like, no, like
that's why I'm really enjoying like the new there's I wouldn't say it's a new wave because the two people I'm thinking of aren't exactly new musicians, but there is a good crossover of poetry and music in the UK scene at the moment, especially with like Koji Radical, who started off like very much spoken word based. I can't remember what the name of the song was, the one with the garden, and that was an epic poem essentially. But now he's doing like songs with Gets and like real grimy songs with Gets that are just great. And then you've got people like Dave, whose music itself it's just very poetic. Like there's like long epics behind melodic beats, like very poetic in essence. So definitely that crossover, that bridge is happening a lot. And here's one question, and it's something that we definitely would face quite a lot, but do you get that pushback? When you get into, youth groups, when you go to schools or whatever? Do you have that initial thing of when you're like, we're gonna do some poetry, and everyone just goes, ugh? So how have you like overcome that?
In most of the spaces that I've facilitated, the participants have usually had some experience in writing poetry or even just dabbled in it. They know what they're expecting. But I have been to schools facilitating poetry, and you do get that response. It's like, oh, okay. Like, just kind of, yeah. And I think there is still that preconception, and that's because the education system is full of old white men who are writing literature, who are dead. It's I don't know why we're still continuing with that curriculum, to be honest. I don't. This is also the reason why I got into devising, because I'm not a fan of Shakespeare. I appreciate some of it. As a poet, yeah, fair enough. Some of it's lovely, gorgeous. But we don't need to keep churning him out. This old dead white man. Why do we continue to churn him out every single year? Thousands of Shakespeares. That shouldn't be happening.
Oh my God. I'm laughing because, like, not only am I currently doing like Shakespeare productions in school, because I totally agree with you. I love Shakespeare and I do think he's an amazing writer, but I also think it's like, it is the fact that we're so hung up on him is still what was part of the issues with why people are scared to align with poetry. I think Shakespeare's a great writer and the stories are amazing, but like the stories and the essence and what the stories say they have been translated to newer works and more relevant works and works that don't particularly so one thing that people find off-putting about Shakespeare, I think, is actually one of the greatest things about it is the fact that you have to translate the language in a sense. And like, I feel like gaining an extra understanding of language is always going to be powerful, but it's not the best way to introduce kids to poetry. Like, it will instantly put you off. Like, it took me until my mid-20s to get into Shakespeare. Hated him for me. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. And I think it's about how we sell poetry, and poetry in schools is terrible. If the way they taught poetry in schools was to get kids to sit down and watch Def Jam poetry, there'll be a lot more poets in the world right now.
Right.
Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's so backdated the way that we are teaching it, and actually a lot of the curriculum in general, and even in degree level, like in my degree, we were still like looking at theatre practitioners who are like very, very old dead white men, or still like still alive and going practitioners who are like known like abusers and like not great. I like it's like, why are we supporting that? Why are we continuing to put that in our education system when it baffles me. But there is some movement towards it, to like changing it, but it's just doing a little bit of a smattering of something over there just isn't gonna work.
No, it's not going to change. And that's a really good point. I don't get why in this world with so many writers, so many performers, we still have to focus on these few that have been proven to be not good people. So yeah, but I just wanted to, before we get a little bit I think I warned you earlier, I'm going to put you on the spot and make you think of a prompt.
Oh yeah.
Before we get to that, though, I just wanted to one, congratulate you, because the show was great. Like, the kids really come out, they shone, and the pieces were beautiful, and like they were beautiful because of what they were talking about. I think people hear about shoes and think it's just shoes, and like, I think because of where I came from and what we chose as status symbols, like shoes were a very big part of it. And like the way you got these stories out of the kids, I just wanted to understand how you got those stories out of the kids. Like, what was that process like? Yeah, how did you go from meeting these kids to those amazing poems that they developed?
So we've done a number of different things. So I can talk more about what we did in the poetry aspect, but Alex and Ben would have their own pedagogies that they're dealing with it in their own ways. We start the whole process with a prompt zine that's like this. It's a collection of different prompts that they can do outside of the sessions, but they are one kind of exercises that we refer to. But we in essence get them to think about places that their shoes make them think of, places they've been in them. We get them to explore like reimagining what those trainers can do. So it's kind of about exploring the past, what our experiences are like in the present with trainers, and then what we imagine in the future, or like things that don't exist to be. So we have poetry prompts that are centered around that. We use a tool called free writing quite early on in the process as a way to get them into writing and not censoring yourself and just allowing and letting things be. Also that thing of walking into the unknown that we were talking about before, just being like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to keep going. It's just the action of writing. So we use a lot of those tools. Also looking at forms, so looking at different poetic forms that they might be able to edit and take inspiration from to display their work, because as an exhibition we're looking at not just the page, we're looking at page poetry, how it looks, it being visual as well as written, but also being performed. So we're allowing them to have experience in those two things, play around with that themselves and giving them agency over that. So that's the kind of things we do, but also we allow space for discussion. So for a few of Alex's sessions, who's the visual artist, he's asked questions about what they think of their trainers, like what do they think of trainer hype, if they know anything about it, the idea of the ugly trainer, or we'll just get them to discuss topics, because I think discussion's a really important space for ideas to kind of bubble up, and it's when we're a bit more relaxed and just chatting like this that you realise things. So it's a number of different ways. And Ben doing beatboxing, so he does like beatboxing workshops, so taking inspiration from the sounds you hear in the trainer shop and creating soundscapes around that, and thinking about how you can record that as well, how you can record poetry and integrate it with sound as well. So yes, that's the many things we do. It's just a little thing.
That sick. It's like a whole experience. And like, I very much, I believe in the power of conversation. What you said there was very true. Is when you have these casual conversations, you're able to explore and delve deeper into certain things. And I seriously, I think it's a great project, because like shoes are so, like, they say so much about us. Like even that what you said earlier about the idea of the ugly shoes, right? I don't think shoes, like I don't think we can get ugly shoes when you think about, like, it's all about people's perspectives, and like some shoes that I find extremely ugly are perfect other people because they speak to who they are. And I think it's a beautiful project, and the kids' poems, I think they were able to explore that element of who they were through their shoes and what these things meant to them. So it's great. It's a great project. Oh man, I rambled myself out of a question I just had.
Easily done.
That's terrible. Oh yeah, I wanted to know, what is your favorite pair of shoes then? What's your favorite pair that you've got?
My favorite. So it's funny you asked that question, because on our Instagram page we run something called Crep Check. So I chat with a sneakerhead or an artist about their favorite pair of trainers, and every time I get on there, like in the early ones, I just bought a different pair, because I don't know. At the moment, I'm wearing quite a lot. I've got a pair of Reeboks that are the workouts, I think they're called, and they're like suede and like light pink, and they are so dirty at the moment. So like, but they're just so comfortable and easy to wear, and also actually because I'm learning to skateboard at the moment, so they're comfortable to like try and give that a go. So I'm like going out fully kitted out in my helmet, in my like elbow pads, knee pads, everything, and my Reeboks on. So I feel like, you know, got to keep safe when you're learning how to skateboard at 24. So
I don't think you're ever too old to learn how to skate. I'm gonna learn soon.
Yes, do it. Oh my God, tell me.
Roller skating or skateboarding?
Skateboarding.
Skateboarding. Cool.
Yeah. Because are you gonna do rollerblading?
Everyone's doing rollerblading, and I can't lie, it looks cool as anything. It looks cool as anything. So but I'm also like a sly like indie kid. I love skater stuff. Like I just literally, even what I just ordered now was like SB stuff. So that like the skateboard. Yeah. So like I love skater wear. But I'm more scared of skateboarding than I am of rollerblading, and I'll look like a poser. So yeah, good luck though. I'm sure you will be a lot more easier than I would be. I'm just looking at the Reebok Classics, and these are they're not the classics, sorry, the workouts. Good pair. I like the design. Sorry.
They're like very like chilled, you know, trainer. You can wear them with pretty much anything. Because I have quite a few that you know are quite big and chunky, and like I quite like those as well. But you know, when you're just quickly running out, and I'm not really going out that much, they're easy to just pair with something. So yeah.
Smart. You need that casual.
What are your favourite trainers at the moment?
Oh, at the moment, I can't lie, I bought a pair of Jordan Zooms that I've just like, they're a little bit. But my actual favourites at the last year has been Puma has released like a whole series of RX, like RX series.
I know. Those are nice. Yeah. Do you find that, have you got a pair?
Yeah, I've got a few.
Do you find them, because when I tried them on, they were really hard. I don't know if I've got very soft, delicate feet that are just like, no. But yeah.
They're one of the most comfortable shoes I've got at the moment.
Okay, nice. Okay.
The Puma RX.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. So there's, I have to go get my whole collection now. But there's like, I've got like 2 or 3 casual pairs of them that I'm like, I can just chuck them on straight away and they're real comfy though. But then I've got about 2 pairs that are like more like, even though they're the RX, they're like more like dress shoes, you've got what I mean? So like they're a bit smarter, and those are a bit harder in the sole. So like, well, you can tell by the design. They're really smart with the design. Like you can tell when they designed it to be casual wear and when they designed it to be a bit more like a, you know, formal thing. Yeah. But yeah, Puma RX is definitely up there at the moment. So that's been fun. We now know each other's shoes. But I just wanted to know if you've got a prompt for us. If you've got
prompt. Okay. Let me think. I mean, I could give you a prompt from the zine. So this is in one of the pages, this is the origin story part of the zine. And so Tatenda Machai, who is the other poet that I work with on poetry, she came up with this prompt. So I'm actually handing you a prompt from someone else, but I really like it. So it's just a series of questions, but are there a pair of shoes you feel more you in, or a little bit extraordinary when you're wearing them? So write the origin story of how you came to your extraordinary shoes by filling in the blanks with 1 or 2 words for each answer. For superheroes and performers, their clothing and masks transform them into their superhero selves or their alter egos. Nicki Minaj has Chun-Li, Clark Kent as Superman, T'Challa as Black Panther, Daniel Dumoulin as MF Doom. You can be as imaginative or true to life as you want to be. Remember, this is your alter ego's origin story. So just think about your first encounter with your trainers. What time of day was it? What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you feel? Taste? What transformation occurs when you put on your trainers? And what personal skills do these shoes increase? Your ability to run fast, your ability to jump over buildings, defeat your mortal enemies. And then from those kind of abilities, create your alter ego name for when you're in those shoes. And use those things to create a story or a poem. That's just like your little toolbox of things. So there you go. That's my prompt for you.
Amazing. Thank you. And I love the fact that prompt had MF Doom in it. Like, yeah, cool. Anything with MF involved, I'm there. Who's also like the master of putting on a different disguise and then just being a different person. All right. Sick. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Before we go, there's also one thing I like to ask is if there's anyone at the moment that you think, or you just want to give a, like a shout out to anyone you thought, oh, yo, you're doing great at the moment, or I just really like your stuff, and you just think everyone else should, invest in this stuff.
It's a good question. I'll give a shout out to Bad Betty Press, who published my pamphlet. It's run by Amy Aker and Jack Wildhall, who are two great poets and kick-ass parents, and running a poetry publishing house together. I want to give a shout out to them. They recently published Amara's poetry collection and Joshua Judson. I can't remember her second name, but I've just been reading her pamphlet, and both of their pamphlets are just amazing. They're just real champions of really getting people's voices out, new poets, and for the UK wide. I love them. Anyone else? I want to shout out Earwax Collective, who recently, myself and Tatenda, who works on Crep Project as well, we released a mix of poetry and music inspired by the work body and the party body. So I want to shout out Earwax, who allowed us to publish that. That's run by Izzy and Esme. They're great.
That's amazing. Thank you. Funny enough, we had Antonio J. King on last.
Yes.
Who was also published by Petty. Bad Petty Press are doing some great stuff. Seriously, shout out to them. Jake is someone who I'm aware of personally, and I think he's just amazing. It's also been doing this jogging thing recently, Couch to 5K, which has been I'm just being there like, damn, man, I need to run. So yeah, no, it's great. It's great. Thank you so much for your time, Phoebe. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Really appreciate what you do with the kids as well and the project. I think it's a great project. I think the cause and the stories that come out of it are really important. So thank you so much, and all the best going forward. To everyone, please check out Phoebe on her socials, which I should have got from her, which she's going to tell us.
That's okay, I can say them. I'm at Phoebe Sarah Wagner on Instagram, and then Crep Project is at Crep Project, crep.project on Instagram as well. I'm most active on Instagram, so those that go there.
Insta gang, sick. All right, thank you so much, everyone. This has been Spoken Not Stirred. Enjoy your day. Peace.